Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from January 20th, 2023, and I'm recording this on Friday, July 21st, 2023. I give you those dates because that's to let you know when this information is actually relevant, because the market is always moving and changing, and because I'm giving prices. Even next week, these prices may be out of date, depending on what happens. So I want you to know when this was being recorded, when we were looking at this. In addition, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Each week, they put out a list of 10 books that are trending or hot in the market, where there's lots of sales, prices are going up, people are chasing the books in the moment because of option news or MCU rumors, or it's just a cool cover that just came out, or whatever purpose. We usually discuss what the reason was. And we do the 6-month look back to look back and see how these books performed in the market after they weren't being discussed, weren't as hot as they were back then, as at least the news around them has cooled a little bit, usually in the case, to see which books we should chase and which books we should not, to get a better feel for what kind of information and changes actually sustain books versus books that just are flash in the pan and you should just be patient on. So with that, we got 17 books to talk about. Let's dig into this list and see what we can learn. First up, we have Last of Us, American Dreams, number 1, hitting on the list for the second week in a row. Last week when we talked about it, it was basically Tom recorded his video the day before it launched. I think it actually came out, so it launched on that Friday or Saturday, I forget. But anyway, this was 1 week in. It was getting rave reviews. And by this point, it was $160 to $250 for a raw value versus around the $160 mark for a raw value last week. 9.8 was up to $1,200. It was like 11, so it hadn't jumped too much by week 2 for a 9.8. Now it's an $80 to $200 book for a raw copy, so down a little bit, still overlapping on the lower end of the range, but definitely down a little bit on the raw side. 9.8, so $1,000 to $2,000. There is like a $1,900 something sale. There's also several sales in the $1,000 to $1,200 range. So I'm going to put steady, I'll be back. There's definitely an overlap. You can definitely get a bargain. There's also a few sales still on the upper end of these. That's why we're talking about it. But this show kept going. We were still very early in the show. So these early prices seem to have sustained okay. We'll see when we talk about the later prices related to this book in the coming weeks. Next, we're going to move into covers. We have several covers this week to talk about. First up is Vampy, number 24 from 2002. So this is an older cover hitting the list. This is the Drew Johnson limit to 1,500. Basically, we had several of these around this time period hitting the list. These Dave Stephen homages or Dave Stephen covers. There seemed to be a uptick in interest in these back then. This homage was going for, raw copies went for $600. This is apparently somewhat hard to find, somewhat limited back then. But that sale definitely seems like an outlier. Listings right now are started around $400, but there's only been one recent sale over the last few months, and that was a copy went for $182. So this definitely turned into a trap. You could actually argue dumpster fire, but this was not, the 182 was not a super high grade copy, so I didn't put dumpster fire because I also think the condition of the book also contributed to the loss, but seeing as there's listings for less than the 600 is why I kept it as a trap. Next, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles / Ghostbusters number 3, the Corey Smith variant. Back then, this was going for $80. Now it's a $50 book. Again, only one sale. Listings are a little higher, so only the sale down around 50 is actually went through. So this one's definitely also turned into a trap. Not a ton of interest in this. I do like this cover. It's a good turtle cover, but I'm not a turtle collector, so, but even the turtle collectors, it seems like, hasn't been able to sustain this book at that higher level. All right, we're going to keep moving. We have Amazing Spider-Man number 14. You could argue this is Comic Buzz instead of cover, but this is the second print, Ed McGuinness 1 in 25 of the first Hallows Eve. Again, this is kind of on the news that we were going to get a Hallows Eve series is what was causing this book to hit. We've had some Hallows Eve books in the last few weeks we've talked about. Back then, the second print 1 in 25 was going for 175 plus. My thoughts back then was, will this character matter? Will people care? Because otherwise, that's a dumpster fire. Well, it's mattered a little bit. It definitely has been able to sustain a little bit of value. It's still going 100 to 150. That's still a trap compared to the prices back then, but it does seem like people are enjoying the Hallows Eve character, which is nice that we've had one of these that people spiked on that they seem to still be enjoying, but still, even with that, has not been able to sustain those crazy prices. Next, we have Venom number 15, the EJ Sue 1 in 25. And this is the 1 in 25 that was only going for 35 to 50. So between ratio and double ratio, that is always a sign for a book that's going to end up around ratio or less and be a trap. That's what's happened here. It's now a $20 to $35 book with most of the sales like 20 to 30. So this has definitely turned into a trap also. No reason to have chased this 1 in 25 right out of the gate. You can definitely do better now. All right, we're going to keep moving. We have Scarlet Witch, number 1, the Adam Hughes Virgin variant that was limited to 500. So there is a trade dress version of this that you can find online for fairly cheap. But this Virgin version was going for $65 to $75, which for limited 500 is pretty good value, but not great, even at release. Now, raw copies, though, are $50. There's only been 2 recent sales. They were both right at 50. So this is another book that turned into a trap. I think I like this. I'm not a big fan of this cover, but this is definitely not a cover that I would splurge for the Virgin over just getting the trade dress, for sure. It's not to me, one of Adam Hughes' best. All right, next we have more covers. We have 2 more. We have Batman Superman World's Finest, number 11, the Jack White variant. Back then, this was going for $50 to $60 for this variant. Now it's a $10 to $20 book, which is still pretty good because this wasn't an incentive variant. This was just a variant. 9.8, though, only 25 to 60. So 9.8s are less, for the most part, less than what you were paying raw copies back then. So that's definitely a dumpster fire. Still, like I said, I think this is just a regular variant. I don't think it's a B, but I think it was like a C or a D or something. And it's still going for 10 to 20, which is good, just not the crazy prices people were paying initially. And I get music artist variants and stuff have been doing really well in the market, but this one did not hold. Next, our last cover is Nightwing 100, the Dan Mora 1 in 100 foil, which I was wrong. I thought there was a non-foil version of this when I was talking about it, made my prediction back then. There is not. So that definitely, potentially skews things versus my prediction. But raw copies back then were $130 to $180. Now, no recent sales, but the cheapest listing on eBay starts at $190. So what do you do with that? The listings are higher than what the prices we were talking about 6 months ago. So if one listed at 150, would it sell right in the middle of that range from before? I don't know. I'm putting steady with a question mark, maybe worth it, because I feel like if you listed it, if you listed it for what you got it for back then, you'd have a good chance of moving it. But I don't know. It may just be way overpriced, and it would actually be down. But it's definitely not up, because the copy, it's not selling at these prices of $190, $200, $225 plus that this book is being listed at. Next, we're going to move into, we do have 3 Comic Buzz books this week, which is always nice. Star Wars: The Mandalorian, number 1, first appearance of Din Djarin and cameo of Grogu, which I put this under Comic Buzz, but really I think this is more about that we were about to get season 3 of The Mandalorian. I don't know why I put this here, but anyway, raw copies back then were still only going for $4, but 9.8 hit 120. I was very specific in my prediction here, as I said 9.8s are a trap. Obviously, the $4 cover price for raw is fine, and that's what we've seen. Raw copies are still $2 to $5, basically around that $4 cover price average. But 9.8s are now a $55 to $70 book. Definitely a trap there. Season is come and gone. This was pretty highly printed, pretty highly ordered. I don't know that these first appearances of The Mandalorian and Grogu are ever really going to be worth all that much. But next, we have Wakanda number 4, the first appearance of Kimi. Kimi, I don't know exactly how you pronounce her name, but potential love interest for Tosin, and everybody was still on the Tosin bandwagon. Back then, at release, raw copies of this were going for 10 to 15, so you're looking at double to triple cover price for this, which is pretty good for a key, but also not outrageous. Any kind of first appearance sitting around, it's pretty much what it takes to get any kind of first appearance. Minimum is like $10 to $15. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. Sales are really all over that range, and depending on what the shipping is, you might see the sale price at $5 plus $5 shipping, which is really a $10 book. But yeah, it's really all over that range between $5 and $20. 9.8 only going for $60 though. So we're going to call this a steady, and I'll be back, because you can occasionally get a deal for better than at 10 side, but there's also some sales right in there. All right, our last comic buzz book, easy for me to say, is Ghost Rider number 1 from 1990, the first appearance of Danny Ketch, that particular version of Ghost Rider, and this was hitting the list because we'd gotten some panels showing Danny being, basically he was coming back, that he was having something, he was in some chair, and he was going to be a part of the storyline going forward. I don't know. I don't read Ghost Rider comics. I don't know what's happened here. But back then, raw copies were going for $30. 9.8 was going for $3.25. Now it's a $15 to $30 book, which is really kind of where this book usually sits. 9.8, $2.25. Also pretty much in the range of where this book normally sits. So this definitely turned into a down, and I'll be back. Borderline trap. But yeah, this book just went back to what the long-term values were on it, which is not a surprise. Particularly when you get like, oh, the character's coming back. It usually will spark a little bit of interest, but it doesn't usually sustain it. The book is what the book is on this kind of thing. All right, with that, we have one DCU, James Gunn DC book on here, and this is AllStar Superman number 1. And this hit the list because James Gunn posted a tweet with an image of his reading saying, hey, working my way through some reading material, and he was reading AllStar Superman. So people figured out it was AllStar Superman, so they're like, oh, that's what the movie's going to be, which, if you've read AllStar Superman, you know, that'd be a quick way to end your Superman franchise. I don't think it's like the best, it's not really a good starting point for a Superman franchise, but we'll see. So I think he might have just been reading Superman, because that's just good Superman. So, but anyway, back then it was, raw copies were only going for $3, but there was just a ton of sales. 9.8 was hitting 100, which is up a little bit for this, but not a lot. Now raw copies are still $1 to $10. So yeah, it's just, you know, pretty easy to get for pretty cheap. 9.8, so sitting around $1 to $150, so actually that value or higher. So we're going to call this steady worth it. It hasn't really, it didn't back up on the raw end because it didn't really have any place to go. Sales have definitely slowed down, but on the 9.8 side, it's actually kind of, yeah, it's going for where it was at or slightly more. All right, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 MCU related books to wrap this list out. First amongst those is West Coast Avengers number 1. First appearance of the West Coast Avengers team. And this is just, with Wonder Man show coming, there's just rumors. Several of the characters that were part of this West Coast Avengers team are now part of the MCU. So people are like, oh, well, we get a West Coast Avengers team. Because I think She-Hulk's out on the West Coast, and Hawkeye's around, but you could bring in Kate. You could go and do a West Coast Avengers team, is what people were thinking. That's why this book was hitting the list. It's pure spec. Back then, raw copies were going for $15. 9.8 hit $2.99. Now raw copies are $5 to $15, which is definitely a down. I'll be back. 9.8, interesting. We had a $140 sale, the most recent, and a $400 sale recently. And those are really the two most recent, for quite a while, sales of a 9.8. So what do you make of that? I make of that small sample size, 2 sales, a little all over the board. I'm focusing on the raw when I say it's a down, and then I'll be back in this book. All right, next we have Captain America 310, first appearance of the Serpent Society, and a bunch of the members, I think Bushmaster and Copperhead, and yeah, there's a bunch of members of the Serpent Society appear here. And this was all based on rumors for Cap 4. that we were going to get some of these characters, that Serpent Society was going to play a role. That seems to have been somewhat confirmed since then. But back then, raw copies were going for $12 on average, 9.6 hitting 120. Now it's a $5 to $30 book, so maybe even up a little bit on the raw side. 9.6, there was a $100 sale, but there was also a $190 sale recently. So another one with a couple of sales, splitting where we were at. So we're definitely going to call this steady and worth it. You can almost go up and worth it here. But most of the raw sales are kind of 10 to 15-ish, with just a few really nice copies going $20 to $30. So we're going to go steady worth it. If you want to argue this was our one-up book of the week, you probably could. But anyway, I think this really has to do with the fact that we've continued to get, we got the Seth Rollins photos, we've continued to get more information seeming to indicate, yes, we will get the Serpent Society. Next, we have a book that was on the list last week. We have Realm of Kings, Son of Hulk, #1, the first appearance of Jintora, who was rumored at that point, was in the Ant-Man trailer. So that's why people were buying this book. Back then, raw copies were going for $15 to $20. Now it's a $4 to $10 book, so it covered a $10 book. Only one recent 9.8 sale went for $25 plus shipping. So the actual sale price you'll see is $25, but there was shipping, so it's more like a $38 book, but whatever. Either way, cheap. This has definitely turned into a trap. There were no legs to Jintora after the Ant-Man movie. All right, 2 books left, which is good because I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice for some reason this week. Strange Academy, #1, on the list for the second week in a row based on rumors that MCU is going to do a Strange Academy. They've basically been these kind of rumors since the book launched because it seems like a fun way to do an MCU series and introduce new characters. Back then, this cover A, with all these first appearances, almost half the characters on that cover are first appearance in this book. Raw copies were going for $100, 9.8 going for $355. Now it's a $70 to $90 book raw, 9.8 $200 to $300. So we got it down, and I'll be back here. A book that has backed up a little bit, but really these are kind of, it's back again to where it's kind of pretty much set. This book seems to pretty much set in this range, and has for quite some time since it came out. All right, last book is Fantastic Four, #67. First appearance of him. I believe this is when he leaves the cocoon. Back then, a 9.2 went for $22.80, and this was with the Guardians 3 trailer and everything else is what was prompting this. The average, Tom said, average sales were $1,500, which we've talked repeatedly about how you can't, their averages they give sometimes, particularly on older books, mean nothing. So we won't judge what performance is going on with this book based on that average. But now raw copies right now are $40 to $200. Obviously, if you got a really high condition copy, it's probably been slabbed or being sent to be slabbed before somebody sells it. But if somebody tries to sell it like a really high grade copy, it would go for way more than $200. But the ones that are being listed, those mid to low grade copies, are going for $40 to $200. But 9.2 recent sales, $950 to $1,300, and that's a pattern we've seen. You can see across other grades as well. So this turned into a trap post Guardians. I think a lot of people weren't super happy with the way Adam Warlock was portrayed. Personally, I thought it was fine, but I don't have a long history with the character, so that probably makes it easier for me to be like, yeah, it was good. He served his purpose. So, all right. So that is this week's list. 17 books. No books I rated as up this week. You could argue with me on a couple of them that were marginally up. 12 books down, so pretty typical in the way that we've seen performance for this list, as most books are down and patience, as usual, paid off. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.